Babylon's Fall keeps, well, falling, ladies and gentlemen. This game launched to very little fanfare. It's Platinum Games' latest game, a live service, and looking at the Metascore right now, you can see for yourself that the PlayStation 5 version of the game, which has the most critic reviews, scored a mere 41%, and user score is sitting at a 21%. And then looking at Steam, you can see that there are barely any reviews for it, and what reviews there are ultimately mixed. Overall, 45%. More recently, 46%. Not much of a difference there. It is also currently the second worst reviewed PlayStation 5 title, and this is a game that released as a PlayStation and PC exclusive, and that certainly wasn't worth it for Sony and PlayStation. And for 2022, Babylon's Fall ranks as the third worst reviewed game of 2022, behind Crossfire X and Postal 4, both of which are also pretty bad games. Criticisms surrounding the game include its visually unappealing art style, its stale and boring and repetitive level design. Combat does kind of get better as you unlock more stuff, but you really have to play a significant portion of the game to really maximize the full potential of the combat. It's just not a good live service. It's just not a good game. And as if all that wasn't enough, the game recently hit what can only be called rock bottom, with Video Games Chronicle reporting here that Babylon's Fall dropped to just one concurrent player on PC this week. If you didn't think the game was dead before with its paltry player numbers, with its paltry peak concurrent players, well, this should really seal the deal, huh? Here's the article in question. The troubled Square Enix online game is showing no signs of improvement, and this was information that the website got from Steam charts data, which claims that the game fell to just a single player at midnight BST on Wednesday, May 4th. Keep in mind that the game launched fairly recently, back in March 3rd of 2022, and already it's hitting a single concurrent player. If that's not a sign of a dead live service, I don't know what is. And indeed, going to Steam charts, you can see this for yourself. Here we have the peak of 1,166 players. The peak alone is indicative of a live service that really didn't kick off running. Just a little over 1,000 players all-time peak is pretty meager, but from there, it's just a downwards trend. You can see right here a spike or two here and there, but generally the player numbers kept dipping until we got into the double digits, and now we are in the single digits. If we zoom in and look at the past 7 days, you can see right here some spikes and dips, but then right here on May 3rd, the number of players shown right here is at a measly 1, and then it kicked back up, but we're still looking at mid to low double digits, which is just not enough players to sustain a multiplayer-driven live service that relies on a healthy player base so that players can matchmake with each other and cooperate to tackle the game's various boring missions. And we're seeing numbers go back up to the mid double digits, but that's not much of a positive sign, really. Now, I don't know what concurrent player numbers look like on PlayStation, but I can't imagine them being much higher than the data we're seeing from Steam. And it doesn't help matters that they kept this game PlayStation exclusive. It could use any sort of sales boost, but the exclusivity just straight up limits the number of players who can access the game, and people are poking fun already on social media in response to Video Games Chronicle's article. Somebody said the game could have had 2 players playing concurrently if it was not timed exclusive. Others responding with memes like the Tomb Raider shame image here. And then there are others who are drawing comparisons to other titles that were not live services, that did not host microtransactions, that didn't engage in a greedy and very kind of cash grab manner and managed to sell pretty well, like Project Triangle Strategy. On the flip side, old school SRPG Triangle Strategy, no microtransactions, no DLC, is going to pass 1 million units sold in quick order. Asano seems to be getting more and more power within Square, and that is a good thing. Now, this news is especially relevant given how developers have responded to the low player base surrounding the game and the low critical reception, as well as its low commercial performance. They said back in March 18th, 2022, today we revealed new information information about version 1.1.0, the Nier Automata collaboration event, and the future of Babylon Falls development. Read the full update here. Clicking on the image will take you to this statement where they really wanted to emphasize that Babylon's Fall is not in danger of ceasing development. Is the continuing service in danger? No, there are no plans to reduce the scale of development on Babylon's Fall. Content up to the end of Season 2 is now practically complete, and we have started work on Season 3 and beyond. That's great and all that they were already prepared for a full-fledged Season 2, but if the game itself on a core foundational level isn't any good, then it doesn't matter how many seasons you come up with, people are not going to want to engage with this game for the long term. It's sort of like the opposite issue that Halo Infinite has, which has a very solid foundation, but they weren't prepared when it comes to future content, and so now they're playing catch-up, whereas Babylon's Fall, they seem to have been prepared for Season 2, but the foundation itself is too rocky for future seasons to really matter. But they insist that we'll continue to provide new content for the game and make improvements based on player feedback, striving to keep existing players playing and to attract newcomers. I cannot see that happening unless they pull a Babylon's Fall, a Babylon Reborn, unless they pull a Realm Reborn and just completely overhaul this game. Its visual style, its gameplay, its monetization, its level design, you name it. I just don't know how this game is ever gonna rise back up. There's such a negative reputation surrounding this game, and the thing about dying live services is that it's this vicious cycle involving players leaving and then existing players perceiving the players leaving and deeming the live service itself as dying, on top of the fact that the game just isn't that much fun to play, and so more players keep leaving, and that vicious cycle kind of reinforces itself until you eventually get to a point where only one player, and at best the player count maxes out at the low to mid double digits, which is still just no good at all. Now, beyond this being a Platinum Games developed title, it is also a Square Enix published title, which has had all kinds of bad luck and bad execution when it comes to live services. Marvel's Avengers is a prime example of a failed Square Enix live service. As of November of 2020, Marvel's Avengers still hadn't turned a profit since it released, and it was reported that the publisher has made a loss of more than $60 million at the time for Marvel's Avengers. Looking at the player base for that game now, it is doing better than Babylon's Fall, but doing a little better than one of the worst releases ever isn't really a high bar to overcome. It is in the sort of low to mid triple digits, still not enough to really sustain a live service of this nature. And what's especially baffling about this one is that they had the Marvel and the Avengers names to help promote the game, but the game itself just wasn't any good. The quality of the game matters. You know, you can slap whatever popular brand or name on a video game, but if it isn't good, it's just not going to sell. Negative word of mouth is going to spread, and people are going to steer away from a game that ultimately will waste their time, and they're going to stick to experiences that actually, you know, respect their time, because people's time are limited, and these live services demand dozens, hundreds to thousands of hours of people's time. And people are willing to go through that if the content is compelling, but that wasn't the case with Marvel's Avengers, and that certainly wasn't the case with Babylon's Fall. And I've said this before, but it's a damn shame, because Platinum Games is a studio that I think is sorely underrated, but Babylon's Fall, I think, is probably their first big critical flop as far as game releases are concerned, and I hope this isn't a trend that continues. Platinum Games specializes in single-player action games, and them helming a live service despite having very little experience with that genre kind of set them up for failure in a similar manner to how Square Enix is signing a Marvel's Avengers live service to Crystal Dynamics, a studio that's more used to creating single-player story-driven action-adventure games, was a pretty big mistake. And just the decision of turning Marvel's Avengers into a live service in the first place, that also was a mistake, and I think at the foundation of why that game failed so badly. Babylon's Fall, similar thing. And so what we're looking at here is a scenario where, on top of the $200 million that Square Enix lost from the disappointing sales of both Crystal Dynamics' Marvel's Avengers and Eidos-Montreal's Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy, now they have to contend with losses from Babylon's Fall's development, which Square Enix worked closely with Platinum in order to make happen, from what I understand. Hell, I mean, there's a whole Nier event surrounding Babylon's Fall. And beyond that, Babylon's Fall actually borrowed assets from Final Fantasy XIV to help its development along. And the culmination of all of the monetary losses surrounding Square Enix's botched video game release endeavors is that they've sold off Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal recently, alongside all of their IPs like Deus Ex, Tomb Raider, Legacy of Kain, Gex, you name it. They sold all of this for a rather cheap $300 million when compared to other acquisitions to, I guess, try to make up some of that money. But the bad news is that that money, I don't think, is going to be put to good use, as Square Enix has expressed that part of their goal is to invest in new businesses, including blockchain, aka NFTs, AI, and the cloud. So apart from mishandling a number of releases, the direction that the company's headed in, what they're prioritizing in terms of business strategies and business schemes, it all paints the picture that Square Enix is steering the ship in the wrong direction. It's also worth mentioning that Outriders didn't make a profit in 2021, as confirmed by the developer People Can Fly, so more losses there, though this is one IP that Square Enix has said that they are gonna keep. This is one of the 3 Western IPs that they haven't sold off, so maybe they see some potential in Outriders for a sequel and whatnot. Given that Outriders, compared to other Western releases, performed better than expected, but still it couldn't turn a profit. So Square Enix has just been losing a lot of money, and I think it's time for them to stop with the looters and the live services and lean into what they do best. Those grand single-player adventures like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, among other franchises. And obviously they've been killing it with Final Fantasy XIV, the one live service / MMO that is actually doing incredibly well, it now being the top MMO currently. And I do think in large part that has to do with Yoshi P's guidance on the project, and I think Final Fantasy XVI is going to turn out really well because Yoshi P's behind that. You've got some good leaders there who are keeping certain games afloat and successful, but in terms of the overall management at Square Enix and the direction that they're headed in, it's clear that so much of what they're doing just isn't working out, and just the future that they're painting for us via their announcement that they plan to invest more in, blockchain and whatnot, and via things like this New Year's letter that talks about how important the metaverse and NFTs are going to be for the future of gaming, and how play to have fun is no longer a standard thing for video games, and all that jazz. It just, I am not looking forward to where Square Enix is headed under the leadership of the current CEO, Yosuke Matsuda. It just feels like live services are being shoehorned into studios and IPs where that kind of genre doesn't belong, all for the sake of cash grabbing, for the sake of long-term monetization, without considering the integrity of these projects and what's actually best for these projects. And these short-sighted decisions has cost Square Enix hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm certainly curious about how much Babylon's Fall has cost them, given this is by far their worst release, and topping Marvel's Avengers in terms of worst AAA live service launch is quite the feat, dipping to a single player just 2 months after launch. That's one man's take anyway. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the latest developments surrounding Babylon's Fall and its falling player base, and what your prospects are for the future of Square Enix, what you think the future holds for this company with the current direction that they're headed in, and with their numerous flops as of late. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.